Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're tuning in from across the globe. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Simon Shah, and I'll be hosting today's webinar on streaming your record process with the touchless close. So to start things off, I'll pass it over to Shak Akhtar, General Manager for Finance Automation here at Redwood.
Thank you, Simon. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everybody. My name is Shak Akhtar. I'm General Manager for Finance Automation Business Unit within Redwood. I've been here 10 years, and my background is finance operation. I'm working with most of our customers. Hopefully, you'll find the next hour fruitful. The theme of the hour is making close a non-event, giving you compliance and productivity gains. So quite often, whether you talk about task management, whether you talk about balance sheet reconciliation, it is mostly about compliance, and it kind of rarely gives you the ROI that you perhaps envisage at the beginning of the process. The idea of making close a non-event is that if you imagine your close being a series of activities and tasks, whether it's 200, 500, 1,000, there are many activities that has to be performed in terms of manually because they're compliance related, they're 4I's principle related, SOX related, etc. But there's a huge variety of things in there that doesn't have to be manual. And our objective is to take you on a journey where fundamentally we automate everything that doesn't have to be manual. And by default, when you finish that journey, your close becomes touchless. I'll talk a bit more about that. A little bit of survey, some of the information we've gathered in the recent past. So Gartner, and hopefully, I'm not sure whether some of you will fall into some of these categories, but in Gartner survey saying 86% of the audience wanted faster real-time close. 68% wanted cheaper close, and 64% wanted error-free close by 2025. Another survey that was done by Institute of Management Accountants, 80% were not satisfied with their closing process, and 66% rely heavily on manual work done in the spreadsheet, which is kind of surprising in current day and age. But you may not be in that category. And earlier this year, Shared Services linked with a survey where 52% have very low levels of automation in R2R. R2R seems to be an area which seems to have been left behind. You may not be in that category. 36% have moderate level, and then but so very small percentage of they consider high levels of automation. And part of the reason is really when you look at the R2R activities, excluding group close, so entity close activities, 70% of the activities is performed outside of the ERP. So ERP doesn't really help. It's a system of record, which means those activities are then performed outside of your ERP, which means either in a tool or spreadsheet, an email, whatever it is, and hence that leads to lots and lots of manual activities. And hopefully, we'll guide you through what you can achieve with Redwood. Redwood, if you're not familiar, then it's as a company, has been around for 30 years. 20 of which we've been working very, very closely with SAP, deep partnership, but down to individual code level. We've been co-development partner. Talk a little bit about that. Redwood, we're growing. It says 500 plus, so now it's 560, almost employing 10-15% people per month. And we spread widely across the globe, Europe, US, and Latin America to give you that 24/7 support that you will need. And here are some of our customers. I'll talk about a few of them, but they fall into the category of anywhere between 1 billion to hundreds of billions. So they vary in size because this subject is applicable to almost everyone. SAP, we have a deep partnership with SAP, as I mentioned. We are certified in almost everything, and we were Pinnacle Partner Award. We won the Pinnacle Awards for 2024 in this, and we are part of the SAP RISE program. Anybody who is from SAP, work in the SAP area in your organization. So record to report, giving you compliance and productivity. So what I say is that what is your ambition? Ambition is imagine a world where you no longer have to do any manual journals except ad hoc and last minute adjustments. Doesn't seem very realistic because some of our customers are posting thousands of journals a month. But really, if you think about it, journal is the end of the journey in terms of for accruals, provisions, and reclassification. So you do a lot of work, you create a journal and you post that. And all of those activities, accruals has already happened. So there's no kind of magic or judgment. People are comparing perhaps, people are looking at missing data, which is often the case. Provisions, most of the provisions, unless it's legal and some of the areas which are genuine judgment, which is fine, but 70 to 80% of provisions are predictable, measured patterns, looking at what was done in the previous 3 months, looking at aged items, etc. And reclassification, again, quite often this is a repeatable pattern there. When you look at that, tool can do it today. Redwood can do it today. The issue is, are your processes harmonized? Is your business transformed to a point where tool can assist? So it is a journey, and it does require business, GBS, shared services to work together. But if you do that, prize is immense, and we can automate that entire process. Intercompany ambition. So if you start with ambition that we will no longer do manual reconciliation at period end, I mean, it seems almost impossible. But the premise is that if you have clear rules of acceptance from a buyer and a seller, then you could argue no more approvals are required. So if the buyer says, I want to buy something, seller says, I want to sell you something, that's the end of discussion. And from that point on, Redwood would take that and create all of the underlying activities and documents required, sales order, purchase order, everything. And because Redwood is posting those items in both of your counterparties' book, fundamentally, they'll always be the same. Therefore, you will still have reconcile as a process, but it will have far fewer exceptions. The exceptions will then be any tax-related items or timing differences, etc. So the idea is, when I said no more manual reconciliation, meaning it just becomes a routine as opposed to something that can consume quite a lot of the organization for 2 or 3 days, and a lot of people doing that. So that's an ambition. If you start there, it requires more than tools. It requires transformation. It requires people to agree what the buyer-seller rules would be, but is a prize worth having. And you work backwards from that to say, hey, what do I need to do in order to achieve that? And certainly as a tool, we can help you with that. There's a whole bunch of activity that needs to be done if you're an SAP customer. Lots of T codes, opening period, cost allocation, currency revaluation. These are automated transaction codes, but somebody has to execute them, and sometimes it doesn't work. So then people get involved. There's no reason why they can't be automated 100% tomorrow. So we have predefined components that execute those items automatically, including error handling, etc. And then finally, you get to reconciliation, which is balance sheet reconciliation as well as other reconciliation. Again, you have accounts which have different risk profiles, which are often discussed manually, and based on that, it defines frequency, defined on the level of scrutiny you will apply. But quite often throughout the year and by period, by quarter, the risk profile may change. So if you do a risk-based review, meaning if you automate the risk assessment of an account based on conditions and rules, that means Redwood will then automatically assign the risk based on what it's seeing in the underlying transactions and the trend, and changing the profile subject to your review. And based on that, it can raise the frequency or remove from this period's reconciliation the level of attention you need to do. So again, these are very ambition items, but if you have that, we can work backwards with you in terms of process transformation, as well as then provide you a tool that will enable you to do that. So where do we play? Where is the most of the work? So what you're looking at here is the green little hill here is a group close, which is Hyperion, BPC, BFC, that kind of world. We don't play here. Where we are focusing on is entity close, which is the red area. Entity close meaning the time it takes or the activities you have to do to close your books, close your company codes inside SAP or otherwise. And then very deliberately, account reconciliation is outside of that, because the account reconciliation doesn't have to be performed during the close, but some reconciliation do have to be, like subledger reconciliation, bank reconciliation, etc. When you look at the largest portion of the activities during your period, which is the entity close, 60 to 80% of that are spent in these areas. So the accruals, provisions, and reclassification can almost take up 40 to 50% of your work. Intercompany, probably 20%. Other reconciliation, 10%. And then SAP activities, closing, ERP tasks, another 10%. So those are the areas that you can focus, or we can help you drive efficiency in those areas individually or as a total. And our objective is really, really simple. We squash that curve down in terms of time it takes to do those activities. And whilst we're not advocating we can help you do faster close, what we can do is you spend less time doing it. And what you do with that time is up to you. Either do more analysis or use it for productivity gains, or if you're not comfortable with the number of days it takes to close, then you can use that less time that you're spending to actually squash the time you spent taking to do that particular entity close. That's what we bring to the table. How do we do that? So you can look at close at two different perspectives. One is what I call the modular view. So big buckets, accruals and journals, intercompany, reconciliation, etc. And you say, okay, where's my biggest challenge? And I'm going to automate those. And we can definitely do that. A lot of customers take that journey with us. This particular customer took a slightly different approach. Is they look at close as a continuous set of activities, which in their case at that time, which is not great, minus 10 to 0, so 10 days to close. And they identified all of the areas that either take a lot of time or they created a bottleneck, which held up the close. And they arrived at the table, all of these processes harmonized, and they automated all of these in less than 11 months. And the net outcome was that they achieved 80% reduction in time in these areas. But more importantly, kind of 10, 15 months later, they were able to reduce their close from 10 days to 5, because instead of taking as a productivity gain, they said, okay, if an activity used to take 2 hours, now it takes 10 minutes, then we can squash the entire time that it takes to do those activities. Therefore, they were able to reduce their close from 10 days to 5. So there are two ways of looking at the close. Big buckets, let's attack where the challenge is, or look in the entire close, a set of activities. You start somewhere, you finish somewhere, you have 300-400 activities to do. What are the items that must be manual? We don't touch that. What are the items that should be and could be automated? And we automate that. So different to the previous customer, this is Siemens. They took a much more modular approach. So they have, obviously, most of you know Siemens in terms of organization. These are the companies that they have looked at, and the activities, the process area they've looked at is more traditional approach, which is task management, journal entry, balance sheet reconciliation, other reconciliation like bank reconciliation, also fixed assets. So again, there seem to be quite often, if you're part of a GBS organization or shared services, quite often fixed assets seem to sit within the R2R organization, and they're using Redwood platform to automate that. And they've been our customer for the last 3 years. So in terms of modules, we are not a modular application. We're a platform. So our platform sits and connects with all of the underlying ERP or any other feeder system that you may need. So if you're doing an HR leave accrual, we may need to access the HR and payroll data through our connector. If you're SAP organization, Oracle, then you have to then execute that and post it into that particular ERP. So we have pre-built connectors and pre-built component that allows you to do that at a platform level. And then on top of that, what we have built is effectively, we call it pillar, but for all intents and purposes, when you look at the demonstration and when people use it from UX point of view, it looks like a module. It addresses very specific needs of a journal entry user or account reconciliation user or intercompany. But fundamentally, everything is integrated inherently because it's part of the platform. And then what you get is the close management that sits on top of that can execute everything directly, automatically in the underlying area. So you're not having to go in and out of different applications, different sign-on. your close management runs the close, executing these things in these areas, and then through the platform in your ERP directly. So we are not an application. We don't hold master or metadata. We are connected with your ERP and we're executing directly in your ERP, which means there's no ever issue of sync issue between one master data to another master data. And we stay completely 100% aligned to your ERP transactions. Making close a non-event, touchless close. There are many different titles that you can apply to it. It's a rather busy chart, but I'm going to just walk you through it. And then hopefully Chris is ready to show you in terms of demonstration what we can achieve. So what you see on the left-hand side is closed task, like any other closed task. It could be Excel-based. It could be other applications. And automating that this is important in a sense that it gives you global visibility. It gives a discipline to your global organization in terms of people doing things at the right time. It manages your predecessor, successor, and all these things are critical. But once you have automated that, you fundamentally have so far automated nothing because you've just kind of automated the process of closing, the closing calendar. But the instructions are now being sent out by this checklist to people to do the work. It is not doing the work at the moment. Then you have the next stage, which is underlying SAP activities. So there's many transaction codes that need to be executed, like running depreciation, like Forex reval, like cost allocation. But Redwood would just automatically execute that. And one of the customer scenarios, which Chris will show you, things like what we call error handling, but kind of more sophisticated error handling. So in a customer scenario, which may not apply to you, is when they run the depreciation, the cost centers are blocked and therefore it's rejected, and they have to go and unblock those cost centers manually. They rerun it, and then they go and reclose those cost centers. That's their rule. So what we built was really simple, a predecessor task that checks the block centers, cost centers, unblocks them, runs the AFAB transactions, post it. Then the successor task after that is reclose all the cost centers again. That's a scenario. That's the level of kind of sophistication we can achieve within SAP transaction. But between the task management and the SAP transactions, so far you've automated 20% of your close because the big areas are not quite addressed yet. Then what our checklist will do is it has a task called create and post, do a reconciliation. That is an instruction for our reconciliation area to go and do the reconciliation, let's say intercompany, run the reconciliation. And then the next thing is what do you do once you find the exceptions? Is it simply you email it to people? And then Redwood can do that. It will run the reconciliation, find the exception items, and email it to people. Kind of simple stuff. But if your rule says, no, I'm going to post an accrual, then Redwood will reconcile it, find the exceptions, create the accrual, post the accrual, and then reverse the next period. But what you've done is pass the problem effectively the next period. It will go through task by task, and it will start to execute those tasks automatically from the checklist. And when the task is completed, it will tick the checklist automatically, task done. So people are not having to manage these things manually. And then it will kick off the next, the successor task automatically. So it is a journey, but once you finish, Redwood Checklist will fundamentally run your close, making sure all of the compliance and manual activities and reviews are done. People are reminded. If there's a holdup, Redwood knows, and therefore it will alert and escalate. But it now is fundamentally executing your close. So when we talk about touchless close, what we're saying is Redwood Close Task Management will execute all of your closing items, but it will keep you aware, informed, and from compliance perspective, it will keep those record. And from audit trail perspective, it will keep every single steps that's performed in a clear structure that auditors can review it in the same way that we'll do if people were doing those activities. And that's what we mean by touchless close. Redwood Checklist executes the close wherever a task can be automated. Chris, are you ready to do a short demonstration of that? And then I'll come back to some more areas and some more customer use cases.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so let me share my screen. So yeah, let's take a look at what Shaq's explained and focus on making the close a non-event and as close to touchless as possible. So what I have open here is an example of a closed checklist. We're going to have a look at a variety of persona interactions here, starting with an administrator. You're looking at the process model and the dependencies between tasks and what the different tasks represent, different degrees of automation. As you can see at the top here, I did execute this closed checklist not long ago. And so once we've explained these tasks from an admin perspective, we're then going to switch to an end user, how they would interact with tasks, and then look at some supervisor and high level management exec views as well. So you can see the folder structure that makes up my closed checklist at the top level, my EMEA shared service center, then going into subfolders for company code, then into accounts receivable, accounts payable, cost accounting, etc. And then I also have all my individual tasks. And there's various degrees of automation that you can achieve with Redwood. So one task that I have at the moment is a manual task to review and adjust asset disposals. And on the right-hand side, we can see the parameterization of this manual task. These parameters are entirely configurable. So this is just an example of the sort of parameters that you'd want to assign to a task like this. Timing conventions, organization parameters like who the executor, the approver, the working day milestone. Because this is a manual task, I've included a parameter to distribute work instructions as an attachment to the user when this task is triggered. And I have additional parameters like delegations and escalation routes, a parameter here where the user is actually required to upload a file when they process the task. And you can even be more granular and restrictive on parameters like this. So maybe a specific type of file or some other, file related metrics that the user has to upload, rather than what I have here, which is a general any file applies rule. So that's a manual task, which is obviously the lowest level of automation. This is more task orchestration. Shaq explains, the level up from that, how we can automate things directly in the ERP. I've got a couple of examples which I'll show there. Here I have a depreciation calculation where Redwood is using that connection and pre-built components with SAP to trigger AFAB and run the depreciation. This actually has some error handling logic built in to the workflow, and we'll see what that looks like when we engage as an end user. I'll just pick one more task that we'll look at in today's short demo. Here we have a task where we are creating AR reports and breakdowns. Again, Redwood is leveraging the connection to SAP, going in, running the relevant reports, taking the AR data and populating a predefined report pack, which in this case is an Excel report pack. It could be, anything. And we can even push the data to, other platforms as well, such as the power of Redwood. But in this case, taking the data from the AR reports in SAP and sending into a predefined report pack. Of course, I can see as well all the dependencies that exist between my different tasks. So I can highlight and see predecessors in green, successor tasks in orange. I can also model my checklist from here as well. So, if I wanted to add my general AP close as a successor to my match bank data for whatever reason, very easy to do. I can easily create dependencies, adjust my Gantt chart view here accordingly. But Redwood is also going to, protect the integrity. In this case, I've tried to move a task, but its deadline is actually earlier than its new predecessor. So Redwood is going to raise alerts and error warnings for stuff like that as well. Okay, so that's very much an admin view when it comes to task modeling and setting up dependencies. Now switching persona to an end user. Like I said, I executed this checklist before the webinar. Now, how would an end user engage? If there's somebody that just has a few tasks, reviews and approvals to do as part of the close, then they might choose to work from their mail client, which is what you can see here. So the AR aging report, which I just talked about, Redwood went into SAP, ran the right reports, took the data, and then pre-filled a report pack. And in this particular scenario, that report pack has just been sent to me. And I can open that up in Excel. Just open in a second. There we go. And we can see our AR aging report pack, which has been dynamically populated by the report output in SAP. In this case, no follow-on task for me to do as a user. It's really just a case of reviewing the data that Redwood has prepared. The other task that I mentioned was the depreciation run, where Redwood is directly triggering the AFAB transaction in SAP and sending the output to a user. But because Redwood is a platform, we can also build in error handling logic and conditional paths into workflows. In this case, the depreciation run finished, but it actually ran twice. And in the initial depreciation run, assets were referring to cost centers that were closed. So as part of the workflow, we built in a rule where if this specific error is encountered, Redwood will go and temporarily reopen the cost centers, run the depreciation, and then close the cost centers again. That may not be what you want to achieve. It's just to show the flexibility of the platform, and it's actually a scenario that was implemented by a Redwood customer. So instead of encountering an error and just sending an error to the user, in this case, the user is still sent the final depreciation log of the successful task execution, but also sent the initial run, which encountered errors related to those cost centers. Okay, so in those two examples, I'm simply just being sent data by Redwood, where Redwood has actually done the automation in their back-end connected systems. If I'm somebody that is more heavily involved in the close, I might prefer to work from Redwood's own task manager. And this is where I can go to find all of my tasks, including that manual task that we touched on in the admin view. So here is that manual task to review and adjust asset disposals. In my Redwood inbox, I can see all the details related to this task, what it is that I need to do, what the deadline is, etc. I can also see the work instructions that were distributed to me, as we saw, built into the parameter of that manual task in the checklist. And because this is a manual task, now as a user, I can do my work and then confirm and move on with the next step of this process. What you'll also notice is it will also push back. So another parameter that I set on this manual task was that I have to upload a file when processing. So it's pushed back immediately to the user, alerted me that I need to upload an attachment. I can do that from here. I'll just pick something from my Windows Explorer there. I've uploaded my evidence. Now I can process the manual task, everything audited and logged. And in this particular scenario, the manual task is complete. We move to the next step, which is a 4i principle where, again, just for the demo, this is me as the approver as well. But now the approver has been sent what the manual task execution looks like by the executor, as well as the evidence that they uploaded when processing the task. So those are some end user views, either from their mail client working or from the Redwood platform, like we engaged with this manual task. As far as supervisors are concerned, we have the workbench, which if I just open this up, just popped open on another screen. This is more where supervisors can get a holistic overview of the close. rather than individual tasks that have been assigned to them or to their group, the supervisor here can see all of the tasks that make up the checklist, the status, and any other data points that they choose to include in the workbench, like I have here. And from here, a supervisor can, filter accordingly. Maybe I only want to focus on tasks that aren't complete, like the review and adjust asset disposal task that we just engaged with. This is currently waiting, so maybe there's a bottleneck here that I need to see. I can click into that as the supervisor and again see all of the details, right? So we can see the first phase was completed, which was the manual task execution, the work instructions that were used, the evidence that was uploaded. But I can also see that there's a second phase to this task that is currently waiting. And as the supervisor, again, I can click into this. In this case, it's the approval step. And I can see, again, all the attachments that I need to see as a supervisor, any notes that are being recorded or conversations, even affected dependencies. I can see very clearly that our post-depreciation step is being held up by this bottleneck. And I can take action from here as a supervisor. I can delegate this task to somebody else in the organization, or I can intercept, and in this case, approve or reject on behalf of the task owner. So the workbench is for, operational oversight. And of course, for more high-level execs and managers, all of our data can be pushed to dashboarding solutions. In this case, using our native Power BI connector, which we ship with predefined dashboards like this, where I can see, in this case, a period close summary with all of my filters that I can slice and dice accordingly. In this case, I have a dashboard showing me tasks by owner, by company code, by workday. Maybe I want to filter by overdue tasks. I can see Jeroen has a lot, so I can drill into Jeroen's tasks and view the details here at the bottom. Or maybe I want to have a separate dashboard which drills into task ownership in more detail. So again, picking on Jeroen here, view the different tasks that are assigned in his name, dependent tasks, view the task details, and get to, high-level metrics very easily. And also these dashboards can help with, comparative analysis across periods and help with continuous improvement in the close cycle.
Thank you, Chris. I'll let me take the screen and walk you through some of the customer scenarios. So as I mentioned, so what you saw was the what effectively is a touchless close. So where Redwood checklist can take care of manual activities, telling people what needs to be done in a timely manner, managing predecessor, successor, but also executing where the task can be automated. And obviously we don't have time. There's a high level of sophisticated processes that are also in that demonstration, which are customer scenarios. So and one of the things that there, which we probably won't have time to explore today, is the accruals and provisions. So when you look at what you're looking at here is the right-hand side, which is the journal entry. Most people refer to as journal entry process. It's like a workflow where people come in and upload the Excel spreadsheet or some kind of template where type in the number, and then it works through the workflow to based on threshold, based on approval matrix. It goes through the organization. Once everything is approved, it gets posted into SAP or ERP system, and then people are sent a notification saying everything is done. And eventually the documents can be archived. So this is typically the journal entry workflow, which is needed for compliance reason. But when you look at the work, this represents 20 to 30% of the work. The actual work is in preparation of that Excel spreadsheet, which then gets uploaded into journal entry template. And that's typically 70 to 80% of the work. So, for example, what in this scenario, leave accrual, people will maybe get information from HR department, the HR report, running payroll report, and then using that data to transform and merge the data to calculate and prepare the spreadsheet, which will then automatically will be uploaded into the journal entry tool. So this work here that people will be doing is done by Redwood. Same is the case for all of them. So doubtful debt, if your process is, hey, run age debt and a report from SAP, Redwood will do that based on the criteria you use, whether it's separate based on age or value or profit center, whatever it is. It will apply those criteria, do the calculation, then send it to people who need to approve it, and then it will execute that using that journal entry workflow automatically. So when we talk about automation and a process automation, we're looking at end-to-end process. That doesn't mean you have to eat it all at once. So quite often people will start with phase one, which is journal entry, and then start to tackle these areas which requires harmonization, etc. But Redwood can automatically do that. So what we're doing is compliance, as well as the preparation and productivity, which is what most of the work is. So this is a customer scenario, which is a kind of 45 billion euro organization, global organization, and they were using Blackline. They still are using Blackline for plus 4 years for the journal entry process, and they were very happy with it. Fundamentally, they have different means of attaching Excel or uploading Excel, which goes through some kind of approval process and then gets posted into SAP and then archived. And this part is automated. What they found was that the effort, 70 to 80% the effort applied by people who were doing these part manually, and then with the Excel and the document was uploaded, evidence uploaded into Blackline, which then processed it. The beginning of last year, they did a pilot where Redwood literally did the entire end-to-end, getting the information, doing all of the segregation and transformation of the data, and then creating the journal, getting the supporting document, which is already, in this case, it's not always the case, already happened to be in SAP, so extracting that information as part of the supporting document, and then putting into route for approval. Based on this, they're rolling out Redwood across the world and replacing Blackline. So looking at now moving into the balance sheet reconciliation area, what this slide is telling you is that if you're doing everything in Excel today, it is 100% manual. If you do auto certification at balance level, zero balance or whatever rule you want to apply, then effectively 65 to 70% remains manual because somebody has to verify the line items underneath it. If you then group the account, which means you're applying less rules, you're applying at account group level rather than transaction level, then again, you get some automation and you do reduce your manual activity because you're kind of certifying the account at group level rather than each individual account level. And then finally, you get to line items. So at Arla, this is Arla case study where the Redwood can apply those certification rules, and these can be completely flexible based on what you do today or what is required to do for compliance. And it applies those rules at line item level, and then it auto-certifies it. As a result, 75% of the accounts are auto-certified, requiring some manual activities in the remaining for approvals and review. And one of the things we're doing right now, a pilot with Arla and Siemens, is there's a lot of effort involved in categorization of the transaction before commentary can be made. And that categorization criteria can often be quite manual, looking at transaction, grouping them before you can place one comment against, 10 different transactions. So that categorization right now is done by rules. And the thing with rules is that quite often the rules are not that straightforward. So we've automated as much as possible based on rules, and it's robust and applies it over and over again. But now we're at a point where those rules are looking at description and categorizing it. So, and if you can apply rules, you'll end up with 200 rules. So what we're doing is this pilot is about looking AI learning. So every month, so a user will do 500 lines and AI will just go ahead and complete the remaining 10,000 lines or whatever that is. And then it starts to build that learning and start to really do those work that is very difficult to apply rules, or it is very subjective. The things are buried in descriptions and so on. So it starts to learn based on what users are doing and judgment. So we're doing that pilot. So we can already apply rules and automate today. I've been doing it for years. Up to 75% of the accounts is fully auto-certified. Now we're going one stage further and working this pilot. It's a live pilot. We're working with Siemens and Arla. So this is the same customer that I mentioned earlier, the 45 billion euro organization, global. They had Blackline for reconciliation. They still do. They're rolling out Redwood. And what they found, the same thing, the Blackline was becoming a repository for compliance, SOX compliance reasons. But all of the work that was doing, which was a preparers were doing all of the work in this scenario, was still manual. And this is where 70% of the effort was. And then when the work was done, they were attaching the evidence and Excel spreadsheet into fundamentally Blackline. So in this pilot, Redwood did the entire process: classification, aging, updating summary area sheets that required to be done, creating and attaching supporting document directly from underlying where documents were available, where there isn't, then asking people to load manually. And the entire process was done end to end by Redwood. So we were delivering compliance and productivity. And based on these two processes, now this company has been replacing Blackline for the past 18 months globally for reconciliation, for accruals and journals, and for global task management, including automation of those tasks directly from the checklist, which kind of Chris demonstrated. A little bit more on the customers. So Jabil is a $34 billion global organization in multiple countries, 3 or 4 different shared service centers. They have automated these particular processes. So started journey in 21, and then now in 24 here, account reconciliation, journal entry, intercompany, SOX compliance, and using our closing checklists as well as for closing. And based on that, last year they saved 8,700 hours from their 4-day close, which is in itself is pretty good. And then this year they will get to 100,000 hours of time saving from their 4-day close. Briefly going to touch on, we don't have time to demonstrate all these things. So the key things that we don't have time to demonstrate today is accruals provisions and journal entry, and intercompany, which I'll touch on here. So intercompany, again, I talked about the ambition. Hey, what is your ambition? Imagine if you didn't have to do any reconciliation. So that depends on your maturity, harmonization, etc. You absolutely have to do reconciliation. And we have a tool. We do many matches. We find the matches. We do suggested match, and we then find the exceptions, and then we say, what do you want to do? And then people just deal with that. The next stage of evolution is then, as I mentioned, we will then, if your rule said create an accruals, we can automatically create accruals and post it, and the reverse next period. Next stage from that is still following from reconciliation. Instead of posting accruals, which is pushing the problem to next month, we actually do the detailed posting, whether it's intercompany journals or invoice, whatever is required, automatically into counterparties' books, subject to your rules. And that way your reconciliation problem is resolved when the exceptions are found. But the ultimate really is intercompany agreement, meaning the buyer says, I want to buy something, seller says, I want to sell you something, and that's the end of discussion, approval process. And then Redwood will automatically use that approval to create the underlying, the sales order, the purchase order, the sales invoice, the purchase invoice. And because Redwood is creating that, it will then always match. You still perform the reconciliation, but the time spent, manual time spent to reconcile, because there are fewer exception items, then you spend much less time doing a reconciliation at period end and only really looking at the exception items or timing difference or tax compliance. And you can do things like more than that, because quite often service-related items create a lot of manual activities. So if you have any royalty payment based on clearly defined pattern, then clearly what Redwood will do is take that amount from an account or group of accounts automatically, apply those rules, create the agreement template, send it to if your process says they must approve, send it to the receiving party. When they approve, it can automatically post the resulting entry. And it can do that for cost allocation. It can do that for anything that has to be done automatically and is recurring. But it can also deal with manual things where a person fills out a template, Redwood will automatically send it to the other person. They review it. They fill out any additional information they're required. And that's the end of this interaction. And Redwood just takes care of the entire process, including things like pro forma invoices and so on. And just another reminder, we are not an application. We're a platform which works directly with the underlying ERP, meaning we're not holding the metadata and master data. There's no duplication, no place for errors. We're executing these things directly in SAP using the SAP or another ERP's metadata. Therefore, chance of errors are substantially reduced. I don't think we have time for demonstration. So we'll just kind of, if anybody who is interested in further demonstration of intercompany, accruals, journals, and any other areas or more in depth, please register your interest and we'll arrange it separately for you. Fundamentally, what our objective is that at the moment, if you don't have automation in your R2R within Entity Close, then there are a lot of people involved in doing production of the data. And more manual the activity, the more controls you have to place, leaving you very little time to do analysis. What Redwood is doing is converting up, turning that triangle upside down, which means it's the amount of manual activities you have to do substantially reduced. The more automated the process, the less controls. But what we can also do is automate the controls itself. So really removing manual activities from the whole process, giving you time back. What do you do with that time? It's kind of up to you. Analysis, productivity gains, or if where applicable, you can actually reduce the time it takes to do the closing. I mentioned Jabil, Energy Transfer. It's a Fortune 50 company in the US. They've implemented BSR, journal entry, close automation, accruals and journals, and they're saving 45,000 hours from their 4-day close. And as a result of their retired Blackline, which they were using for BSR before that, and they were using Windshuttle for journal entry, they retired both applications with Redwood.
Shaq, thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
I have just one question. There's nothing coming in the chat box, but I have one question. Just how do you see companies typically start on their journey with R2R automation? Because there's a lot there, but from your experience, what are you seeing? How companies go on that journey?
So there are no hard and fast rule where you start. I think some people will say start with low hanging fruits. Problem is, if we had just go for low hanging fruits, then eventually somebody will say in your organization, well, we haven't achieved anything. If you start the most complex place, you'll get stuck and people say you're not making any progress. So really the idea is to look at where your biggest challenges are. And based on that, look at how much harmonization and standardization do you have. So look at your biggest challenge, and then are those processes standardized? If you pick a process that is not standardized, you'll have 200 different ways of automating it, and you will just get stuck. So where do you start? Look at your biggest challenge, and at the same time, or look at your harmonized processes and tackle those first. Simplest way is close checklist. But the thing about simple is that when you've done that, it's just that you've automated your close checklist. So you have to have more ambition, but harmonization is also key.
Great. Well, listen, thank you, Shaq and Christopher, for the presentation and the demonstration of R2R. We appreciate your time and expertise. And everyone else, thank you very much today for taking the time to join us and participate. And have a great rest of your day. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.